I was really struck by an article that I read about co-designing rubrics with students. So I thought, how am I going to do this? Where do I even start? Because I didn't want to take the grade rubric that I was throwing at them for all of these years. I thought, okay, I'm going to create a rubric that I think would work well, that doesn't have a grade attached to it, and would seem to make sense for fifth graders. So Eric, if you could move ahead. I wanted to give them time to process their performance by looking at this rubric. Go ahead and move over one more slide. Okay, so this is the rubric I came up with, and these are words that I have been using for 16 years. Needs improvements, meets expectations, and exceeds expectations. And so what I did was I have 4 sections. So I put this up on the board and I showed this to the student. This was my revamped summary reflection that was going to be super reflective and amazing. Just really focusing on the skills that we've discussed as a class, trying to use layman's terms, all of the things. So I put this up and immediately I asked students, what do you guys think about this rubric? You can tear it apart. I don't care. Tell me what you like and what you don't like. There were a few compliments. Oh, I really like, there's not a grade that, I can breathe again. And I thought, okay, this is a good start. But then I had a lot of hands go into the air that as they were looking at this, they're like, so what is exceeds expectations? And I said, it's really good. It's like, it's better than what it needs to be. But what does that mean, Mrs. Reese? What does exceeds expectation means? And I really did not have a strong answer for them. And I said, okay, well, I agree with you. Maybe there is not a great meaning behind exceeds expectations. What should we do? They're like, can we just take that column out? So we did. And unanimously, without me coaching any of the classes, all 4 of them, I would say 98% of them wanted that column gone. They just simply wanted to know, did I do it or did I not do it? So we went ahead and removed it. They did some wording changes as well. Each class's rubric came out slightly different, but really met all of the same ultimate goals that we were looking for. And I thought the students were really thoughtful about it. And I at first wasn't quite sure how this was going to roll out and play out. Eric, if you want to show the next slide, this was our redesigned rubric. We had some really funny conversations in the class. Most of them were fine with just meets expectations, needs work. I usually had 1 or 2 students in each of the classes. They're like I want 100% all the time. Can you just maybe put a star in meets expectations if you think I did a really good job? Sure, I'm happy to do that for you. And then they also felt like needs improvement really was too harsh. Like it sort of was like, I'm a failure. And so they said, if you put on there, like, look over again or need some work, I feel like, okay, I can go back and I can look at that again. It feels like I have this open ability to go back and revise my work. So this is one example of a rubric that we created together. Eric, if you want to. Okay, so we use this in a variety of ways. I decided that I wanted to give them an opportunity not only to use this for themselves, but also to have the opportunity to do more peer evaluation in the classroom. Because, lo and behold, what we see in our own writing, somebody else views it differently as they read it. We've talked about that a lot in class. And so we started basics, small. And at first I wasn't quite sure. I was like, I don't know if this is making progress, but I'm going to stick to this because I was kind of learning along the way that I think the biggest problem, the reason why my kids can't reflect as well as I'd like them to is because they haven't had the practice. And I wasn't quite sure if it was helpful yet in the beginning, but I stuck to this. So I did this for summaries. You can see we did a self-evaluation and a teacher evaluation. We also, and it was the same every time. So what they viewed themselves, the peers assessed them exactly the same rubric, and then I used the same rubric to grade them. I've now done this for every single writing project in my classroom. So if you want to switch to the next slide. So we did a personal narrative. This was kind of one of our first bigger writing assignments. And this is all done at school. We used Writer's Workshop. It's all about the process. And I am realizing that I wasn't really using Writer's Workshop to its full capacity by leaving a lot of peer and self-evaluation out. So this has been really fun for me to add it back in. Again, I did a self-evaluation, a peer evaluation, and then I used their self-evaluation to make comments on. So it was consistent across the board. All the students knew exactly what was on there. And then every line item that you see were mini lessons that were directly taught to them along the way. So as I went through each lesson, I added a line item onto the rubric depending on when the lesson was taught. And so by the end, they could share with each other what they saw and then also think about their own writing. And I found that, you know, with all of the pieces, students were surprised in multiple ways. I had students that were surprised how well other people in their class were writing because they viewed themselves as the best writer ever, but they got paired with somebody else who was actually a really good writer as well. And it surprised them. They thought, I might not be the number one student in the grade. There is somebody else that can write really well with me. But I also, on the flip side, have students who are very weak writers who thought they did really well on everything. And when their peer evaluated it, they weren't super harsh about it, but the peer would probably, you know, check mark, there's not a lot of detail. But when they read the other person's work, they soon realized themselves, oh, you know, my story's like 5 sentences and they have like, you know, a page and a half with dialogue and all of these things. And they soon realized I've got to go back and do more work. So that's been really fun to watch. And I still wasn't quite sure the progress made, but I think it was going in the right direction at this point. If you want to switch to the next slide. Okay, so we are right now finishing up our first essay. They're doing a persuasive essay nominating a family member for Person of the Year, really focusing on structure and the 5 paragraphs. And I did the same thing. We do our mini lessons. They then did a self-evaluation based on each of the mini lessons. And you can see here that instead of check marks now, we've evolved into actually giving written feedback to themselves within it. It's not the neatest thing in the world, but I was really pleased to see the change of actually thinking through, okay, I think I really did this well. I really loved in the part where we were talking about engaging leads, we used this cute little red writing hooks as an example. We took the once upon a time, and this was in our personal narrative. So it was in the previous writing unit. He's referring back to the lesson from the previous writing unit saying, I need to go back and add a better engaging lead. So I really liked that aspect. And then also thinking about restating the main ideas, he really realized that maybe he needed to go back and look through that aspect of his paragraph writing. And then what I really loved, if you can switch to the next slide, that was a self-evaluation. This was the peer evaluating the student's work. I loved the feedback that he gave. I loved that he said, I can tell how much you love and appreciate your aunt. And it was a very good essay. But then very politely, you might want to consider putting a little more detail in some areas. So instead of having smiley faces and it was good, I'm now actually getting real-time feedback that is more valuable. And for the first time, as I've been now working through conferencing with the students on these essays, it's probably the best set of essays I've had ever in terms of them taking more ownership over their work. So all that to be said, I was really kind of skeptical about the amount of time I was putting into this in the classroom and that it was putting me behind. But I am now recognizing the fact that now that we've practiced more and more, we're actually speeding up the process when we're giving feedback because they've actually held themselves more accountable for the different aspects that we're trying to incorporate into writing. So I've really enjoyed seeing the transformation I've had to be patient along the way, but now I feel the benefits, and it's really exciting to me. I'm excited to do more. We're about to get ready to do research writing and the whole research project, going through all the steps of the process. And so I'm going to use a lot of this technique through that to see if I can do like a portfolio-based reflective research process with them. So you can flip to the next slide. Okay, so I really do feel like this has made them more accountable for their own learning, and have enjoyed watching that process in them. And that's it. Thanks so much.